But thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Martin.
And this is your sixth book, isn't it?
Oh, that's a good question.
Is it your sixth?
Yes. Well, it's the sixth book or seventh. I actually don't know. But before my life as a novelist, I wrote business books.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
Oh, that was a groan. Oh. Yeah. I was a trainer and coach in presentation skills and communication skills.
I saw that online.
So
I got very
yes,
nervous about it.
I did. Don't. I did a couple of books helping people with that. That was when I was in Singapore. But I was plugging away at short stories, and at that point, and then really shifted to mostly writing fiction. Yeah.
That's how you got started in short stories.
Yeah, I had written, I think it's important to remember that when somebody writes, for example, in the bio for this one, I think it says, this is her first novel. This is my first published novel.
Right.
You write a ton before you get, often, I mean mostly. Some people are right out of the blocks, right?
Yeah.
But I had to practice. I had written at least two novels, unpublishable novels, before I got to that one. And then was also working on short stories. So the first thing that was published of fiction of mine as a book was a collection of short stories. And that was like an apprenticeship, just working on those and getting feedback. And then one was published in a literary magazine, which gave me the courage to approach a publisher about them. Yeah.
So I've heard this theory of practice novels before, and I find it very depressing, having written just the one novel myself.
Oh. Yeah, but the thing is, the world is so diverse. That might apply to most people, but it might not apply to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's practice and there's practice. A lot of people write one novel for years and years and years, and that's also practice.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't have to necessarily write a million. If you're a genre writer, and so your novels are quite similar in their maybe themes or the notes you have to hit, right? Yeah. Then each novel is practice for the next. For me, I'm not a genre writer, so each novel you almost start from zero.
Right.
Because you don't know how you're going to write it. But I suppose what you're practicing is clarity and pace and dialogue.
How do you feel about the novels that weren't published? Do you look at them as practice?
I do. It's actually hard for me to I have them obviously on paper, and I don't know whether I'm brave enough to read them. Right. I really don't know if I can do it.
You wouldn't want to revise them and have another go? Or...
I might plunder them if I didn't have other ideas.
Right. If
I felt like I was lying fallow for a bit, I might then jump in and go, maybe there's a short story, so there's something that you could take from it, but it's a little bit like, I'm reminded of, the singer John Bon Jovi, right? And somebody on a talk show showed him like really early photos of the band. Right. And he was so embarrassed because the hair with the tight pants, and he said, everybody has their baby pictures. And that's kind of maybe how you feel about your early stuff. Yeah. Like I knew I could write a good sentence, but not necessarily a good page. Yeah. That's I think what's going on. So it's jogging around the track.
I read that your mother, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Asking.
No.
Was working on her novel for about 30 years.
That's right.
Which is incredible.
It is. Although you don't work on it for 30 years, right? You pick it up and put it down. Yeah. You pick it up and put it down. Because she wrote biographies in between. Can you hold up Glide? So the one that Andy's holding up now called Glide, that one there. I started writing it in 1995 or 6. Put it down. Yeah. Picked it up, put it down. Till it's time. Or somebody encourages you. Andy was like, it's good, let's do it. But you have to don't know how to feel all the time.
That must be unusual because it's almost like, because you change so much as a person.
Yes.
It's like you've got co-authors.
That's really, what a good point. Yeah. Thank you for saying teenager. I wasn't a teenager in 1995. But you can see what theme wants to stay. Right. And what could be changed. Yeah. I took people out it got slimmer.
Yeah.
Is what it did. Yeah, it didn't need as much as I put in.
I always find I do the same thing where I overwrite by about 5 times as much as I
Yes,
need.
that's right.
When you finish, you think, this is brilliant, this
Yeah.
is as good as it could possibly be. And then you come back 3 months later and you're like, what is the point of all that bit?
That's really, really important, is putting it down.
Yeah.
Very, very important to put it down and then come back, right? And then see it with fresh eyes or less emotional eyes.
Yeah.
and that's usually the pace, right? You usually realize you've gotten bogged down somewhere.
Yeah, I'm a terror for pointless backstory. It's my weakness.
But you need that maybe to understand what you need to do next.
Yeah.
And then it can come out. My mother called that scaffolding.
Oh, right.
So what is the scaffolding and what can you take down?
Right.
Right. What have you used to help you write the book?
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you didn't know what to do right then, you went deep.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe the writing experience is so important and interesting, but then you have to check in with the reader experience.
Martin,
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
going. I think they've got football in for me.
You gotta go.
Yeah.
Oh, I got you.
That's okay.
Your limit. I got it. No worries. Thanks. Yeah. So I think and so with this one, I started it in 2017. And I finished the first draft at the end of 2018. So it was about an 18-month journey. And then a book group read it and gave me their feedback, which was really helpful. So that's the reader experience. And you got 6 or 7 different opinions. And their opinions had largely to do with the pace of it.
Okay.
Yeah. But then I put it down because that was when my mother started dying.
Yeah.
And so I spent, it was the very beginning of 2019, and I went in March and I stayed until she died in June. And then I wrote a memoir called Absolutely Delicious, A Chronicle of Extraordinary Dying, about her approach to dying. So that gave me time away from this book. So when I went back into it, I cut the first 4 chapters. And I had been so committed to how I had started it. I had not changed a word. I had moved stuff around before, but I hadn't changed a word from the beginning. I loved the beginning. And you come back, it had been over a year. And that was really, really helpful.
Yeah.
To come back like that.
You learned from your mother as she left it, went away, did another project, came back?
Yeah, I suppose. Or it just happened. I mean, I couldn't work on it, I couldn't. And but also that, just watching her go with what idea was taking her at the time.
Yeah.
And then still having it to go back to if she felt like it, and as she matured and what she wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
Because novels are like novels, if you're really trying to express something, they are many layered, right?
Yeah.
And that may have been what you felt when you said you read it. Like you normally read werewolves and dragons, right?
I write.
You write, that's right. You
Stuff, and
you write fantasy, is it what you call it?
Things with dragons and swords and
Sure.
wizards, sort of thing, day.
Yeah.
And so it was unusual for me to read a book that was just about people and relationships.
Yeah.
And it felt a lot more human than when the problems weren't just how do I kill this massive thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like fantasy books, and especially my own work, could do with a lot more of that kind of tension.
Interesting.
That is in your book. As I mentioned to you, there were parts of it where I was reading it sort of through my fingers, which doesn't happen when I read, action scenes.
Oh, really?
No, yeah, that's just kind of,
Because it might, to me,
right,
swords and dragons, I might.
Yeah,
right?
maybe it's because I'm not used to reading that sort of thing.
It's private, right? What I write is very private.
It's very private.
And it's people either behaving badly or thinking about things that you wish they didn't, or just human nature, that kind of thing. Because even in a more domestic book, there has to be a crisis.
Yeah.
In order to work with people and have it be worth reading, it has to be worth what are we actually doing here? What is the adventure that we're on? And it's just a private one. It's an adventure internally. It hurts.
Yeah.
Right. I do like to write uncomfortable stuff.
It was very uncomfortable in some places, and it was interesting to read about characters who were making decisions about their entire lives,
Right.
rather than the kind of forced suspense that
You're writing in the crisis of the moment, like I'm in physical danger.
If
and
I don't do this, I'm going to die.
Right.
Rather than what do I do here for
Yeah.
my children's sake going forward,
Right.
that kind of thing. So
Right.
that was fascinating.
Oh, great.
Because
Because the concept of the book is the idea of trying to get to blend a family. So there's a divorced woman with one teenage daughter, and there's a widowed man with two sons, a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old. And they fall in love and they want to bring the whole family together. So they decide to build a house, not too far from Worcester. They live in Worcester and they want to build a house in the farmland outside Worcester and bring. And so you have the issues of, do we get along with each other's children? And the stress of house building and money. And also, I think possibly my favorite character in the book is Jeremy's father, who's so brash and overbearing and dealing with that dad issues for a man. How does that feel as an adult man when you haven't quite lived up to your father's expectations? I really enjoyed writing Jeremy and how he struggled with how he felt of himself as a man.
Yeah, I thought he was fascinating. And he was the one making a lot of bad decisions, and you could see them coming.
Oh, good.
In ways that he couldn't.
Right.
And he was like, slow it down.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Which is, it felt like you were properly getting into his head more than he would like, and more than he could himself.
He wasn't going to say what he was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again was brilliant and not something I get from genre fiction generally.
Okay.
But something I think genre fiction could benefit from. Be a bit more human, a bit more private.
I think it depends on the genre, right? So you and I read a lot of murder, right? So there's a lot of psychology in that, right? There's a lot of internal monologue in that as well. It depends on the type of fantasy, I suppose. But if people are in physical danger all the time, there isn't time for rumination, is there? There isn't time for considering their motive. And you have to, as a writer of normal humans, without swords, you have to think about their motivations.
Yeah. Did it help you, having written a memoir, does that inform your...
That's a good question.
You have to wrestle with people's real...
I wonder, actually, it didn't, I don't think it helped me having written a memoir. It helped me having go through what I've been through. Everything in life informs a fiction writer. So there's a scene in The Sound of It where the woman, Sue, her father has had an aneurysm and she's driving to see him and thinking about his death. Thinking about death in general and thinking about his death. And those came directly from my anticipating my mother's death. So it's all fodder. And I think it was Isaac Dinesen who said, anything can be tolerated if you can turn it into a good story. Yeah, as a writer, you can at least go, at least I can use this. It's not just pain. It's grist for the mill. And I've often found in my stories that I'll either resolve something that didn't go well, I'll make it go better in a story. I can make it, I mean, even in this, I didn't realize when I started it, I thought, this will be fun. And 2/3 of the way through, I realized I was dealing with my feelings about how my first husband and I dealt with our kids when we separated. So I'll either do that, or I'll take something that was kind of awkward and make it really bad. So that is also it could have been worse, So, or how bad could it have gone? That would make a good story. What if I had taken one more step? I wrote a story about a woman in Singapore who becomes so intent on getting a boyfriend before her parents come to visit that she basically stalks a guy who doesn't want to date her. They go out once and then doesn't want to date her. And it's that, when you're in that space of no, but I'm sure we get along, that you can imagine, I'll just walk by his house. What if you did that? And then what if? It's nice to roll it along and see.
So you don't you don't sit down and sort of pick parts from your life. You just start writing
and see what jumps in.
Creep in and,
you do. Although I think in the short stories, I've definitely said that nugget is the beginning of a story, or that nugget has to happen in this story. I think that's typical. More recently, though, I've done stories where I thought, for example, I wrote a story recently about a guy who thinks he knows how his mother wants to die. So he tries to help her, but he's wrong. So that was just a concept. Well, how could you write that story?
Yeah.
Who would he be? Where would they be? Yeah.
What was the nugget for the sound of it?
It was, I was watching Grand Designs.
I
love Grand Designs, you know the show, yeah? And we were still in Singapore, so we were planning on moving. We met in Singapore, Andy's from Halesowen, and we'd been planning to move back to England, and so we watched a lot of British television. We enjoyed Time Team and Grand Designs, and so just to look at England and the rest of Britain.
Yeah.
And the history and all of that. Anyway, there was an episode of Grand Designs where it was a young couple, 40, maybe early 40s. They both had children. The idea was to build a house for the 5 of them. And the young woman literally said, "We'll build a house to live happily ever after in." And I was like, girl, like stepchildren and Grand Design. We all know what happens to relationships when people get on Grand Designs.
You can often see the look on especially wives' faces at the end of the show where they're like, yeah, I feel like it was worth it. And they're just like broken inside.
So I don't remember what they were building. I don't remember the rest of the episode. Often I can remember exactly what the house was like, but I think my mind must have just started going all the things that could have been troublesome.
Yeah.
At that point, and particularly, like what if you don't get along with his and he doesn't get along with yours, or if you and also because my husband is my children's stepfather.
Yeah.
And we had a very good experience of that, but watching them circle each other for a while before the relationship found its ground. Was very interesting to me. So I had that in mind as well. Like how do you, so I'll read now, if you don't mind. There's a short passage from pretty early in the book where, so their names are Jeremy and Holly's wedding. And Jeremy was supposed to go, but he's not feeling well. And he's woken up in her house and she's gone off to the wedding. So she lives with her daughter, whose name is Quiva, and I want you to know that it's spelled Caoimhe. It's obviously an Irish name, right? So, what I'm doing here, have a listen and think about what you're learning about Jeremy, and what you're learning about Quiva, even though she's not in this scene. Okay? Jeremy slept till nearly 11 that morning. It was very strange to wake up alone in Sue's bed, the house silent. He had expected to feel cozy opening his eyes to her bedroom, but instead he experienced a sense of abandonment. There was nothing of him in the room. Nothing was theirs. Above the chest of drawers opposite the bed, Sue had hung a poster of Frank Zappa's 200 Motels in an ornate flea market frame. Intellectually, Jeremy approved. But the view unsettled him. He liked a calm bedroom. On his way to the stairs, he stopped outside Quiva's closed door. He'd been given a brief view of the room the first time he'd come to the house, before he and Sue had fallen into Sue's bed, but he hadn't really taken in the details. He stealthily turned the knob and opened the door, feeling silly because he knew Quiva wasn't there. The walls and the duvet cover were pale blue, and dull in the weak light from the 2 small windows. The wardrobe was pine, as was the desk, and looked a little cheap. The desk was tidy. The straight-backed chair at the foot of the bed had clothes on it, draped rather than tossed there. He imagined that the wardrobe would reveal clothes organized by color, or perhaps clothes of only one color. He stepped into the bedroom to satisfy his curiosity, heart pounding, then quickly turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. What had he been thinking? Had he been so bold because the room didn't feel inhabited? Because he didn't have a real sense of the girl? Did anyone? Even after a few months in Sue's life, he still blanked on her daughter's name sometimes. It came to him when he was downstairs filling the kettle. Quiva. He ate his toast and drank his tea at the kitchen table, finding himself hurrying, surprised that he wanted to get home. At home, he would sit at his own dining table with his paper and pencils and draw interior details of the house where everything would become theirs, his and Sue's, except the children's bedrooms, where the children would have free rein. It struck him that Quiva's tidiness would suit the pared-back modern design they were planning. The boys would mess everything up. So it's an opportunity to be in his head while he's sneaking around the house. And sneaking around somebody's house isn't necessarily something nobody else would do. But I hope that, well, maybe having read it, looking back at that passage, you feel the foreshadowing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. He's, he makes bad decisions without really understanding that he's
He
making
goes
them.
ahead, right?
And he convinces himself that he hasn't made the bad decisions in the first place.
This is what I
Mistakes
love.
kind of bad
I want to figure out how people justify stuff to themselves. So I'll write things that I don't really understand and try to understand why would somebody do that.
I love that sort of. One of my favourite authors is Jim Thompson, who's
Yes.
Killer Inside Me and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. And he just writes about sociopaths and psychopaths who
Yeah.
all think they're the good guy, but they are the worst guy in town.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Isn't there a place for that in fantasy fiction?
Maybe I need to read more of it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
definitely, yeah.
And or not just read more of it, but imagine it.
Yeah.
Just imagine it.
There's a lot of anti-heroes who are doing nice things, but they're gruff and nobody likes them. And
Yeah.
They swear at people.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of, I've seen, awful people doing awful things while convincing themselves that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a lot interesting.
Or just normal people convincing themselves that they're doing the right thing when it's so patently not.
Yeah.
Like it could happen.
Yeah. There's not a lot of normal people in fantasies.
Right.
Because you quite often have to fit these sort of slots of here's your warrior, here's your here's your love interest, here's your wise man.
Right.
Sort of, just Star Wars tropes, basically.
Right.
You know.
So this is really interesting because the book that I'm working on now is presenting itself more of a YA thing, but that's fine. I could still write about people in our world, but I'm not. I have created the entire country.
Oh, brilliant.
And the neighboring countries, and which means creating the politics and the culture. I've written folk songs and what is the fundamental crop that they base the agriculture and all their products on, which is how we used to do things, how important wheat was, and how important rice is in Asia, and that kind of thing. Which has me thinking about you winding up to your first novel or whatever, because I thought about this book for a year before I put down the word. And I responded to a farm near our house. I do this walk up to this farm, and I didn't know what the crop was growing in it. And finally, there was a farmer there one day, and I learned that it was flax.
Right.
And bang, I realized that flax needed to be the center of this book. And so then that gives you an opportunity to know what do I need to look at? What do I need to think about? How do I need to, what can you make? How can you eat it? What would you trade it for? And all of that kind of thing. And the colors of it, the textures of it. And so being inspired, again, by Worcestershire, actually, because that's right near Droitwich. I can see the Malverns from that hill. But to build a country that allows, like you were saying, I've also lived in so many places. And I started writing this book on an artistic retreat in Finland. So that also, I really wanted to be somewhere where I was very unfamiliar.
Right.
Because the language is so difficult. I studied it for 6 months before we went, and I could ask for coffee. I was so difficult, and which is wonderfully difficult, so that I was in an unfamiliar place. And that was perfect. And also there was actually a linen weaver nearby. So I was looking at stuff made of linen, which is flax, you make linen from flax, etc. That was perfect. But as I'm writing it, some of my experience in Japan, some of my experience in Singapore, something from here, it finds its way when you sit writing and you think, I need this, they do that in Japan. They do that in China. You know, I could use that here. It's not Chinese people doing it, but it's the process, or it's the thinking, or it's the politics, right? So in genre fiction, like you were saying, you have notes you have to hit.
Yes.
So in this is, rather than like family drama, this is little guy versus big guy. So in this case, it's a 16-year-old girl against the whole government.
Right.
Right. So they want to do something to her that she doesn't want done.
Right.
It's been acceptable by everybody else, and she's not having it. So she's got to fight the system. Right. So I'm writing away, and I don't read this kind of book. So then I go to my husband over here, who loves this sort of thing, and go, this is how far I've gotten. I have no idea where to go from here. And I said, do you think I'm getting near the end? And he was like, oh, no, you got a lot more to do. Because you haven't gotten to this bit yet, which is great. So that was really helpful. I didn't go, I don't know how to write that. I was like, okay, brain, this has to happen.
Yeah.
And you didn't wait for it to happen, because you have to trust it. It's massive in there. It's massive, and everything you've ever done is in there. And everything you've ever read. And all the movies you've ever seen are in there.
How do you feel about the sort of, I don't know if you've seen them, the kind of template-y books? The template approach to
What is that?
writing. In movies, there's a famous one called Save the Cat, where it's screenwriting, but it's by page 3 this happens, by page 5 this happens, by page 60 you're getting into Act 3.
Okay.
So it's kind of, when it's done badly, you sit down and you use it as a formula.
Right.
But if you use it as a sort of a troubleshooting tool,
Yes.
it can be quite helpful.
Yes.
Like, why does this not feel right?
Yes. Well, that's pace again.
Yes.
Isn't it? It's often really the pace. How long? I remember when I was writing this one, it was very different. This is set in Japan. The first draft of it was entirely set in Massachusetts. It changed, so I rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. And there's no longer a rape in it. But I'll just use the example. I mean, it's worse. But anyway, but my agent said to me at one point, he's like, "You've taken 257 pages to get to the rape." You know, and I was like, oh, that's not allowed. I didn't know that. Like, don't you build up to these things? But for the reader experience, it's like they hadn't understood, there wasn't enough tension. Right? So why am I reading this? What is the story?
Yeah.
Right? So getting a little bit, in a novel you have more time than a short story to build up. But more foreshadowing, more almost things, you know.
Things like the blurb on the back will say that there's that in it, so you have to get to it pretty quickly, or they're gonna.
What's all this about? Exactly. Unless there are other things that are happening, right? So
I read interviews with film editors about there's this director Brian De Palma who did a film. He was very Alfred Hitchcock in his style, and he worked with the same composer that Hitchcock used. And the composer criticised De Palma, saying, you know, it's 45 minutes till we get to your murder. And this director was like, yeah, but in Psycho, it's 60 minutes until you get to the murder. And it's like, for Hitchcock, they will wait. You need to get your murder in early, otherwise they're just gonna be like, what is this?
Right. Okay. So he wasn't doing something that Hitchcock was inside those 45 minutes.
He wasn't bearing in mind the reader expectations, I suppose, the reader experience.
Right.
Because you go to a Hitchcock film and you're like, it's going to happen at some point.
Right.
We're fine.
Right.
We're in a master's hands. You know.
Right.
Who's this upstart 20-year-old?
Yes.
You know.
Oh, I see. Exactly. So he's completely new, and you don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to.
That's right. That's right.
Come at it through the viewer's eyes.
Yeah.
In that way, which I feel like I do too much of.
In your writing.
Yeah, I don't let things develop naturally. How did your process go with this one? Did you have
this one?
Yeah, did you have a lot of the plot mapped out first, or did you discover a lot more?
Oh no, I discovered. I didn't know how it was going to end. I just knew I wanted to put these people together and see, and then bring in the building. That was another thing. Like, it was like literal scaffolding. I did so much detail on how they built the building that people were like, I don't think I need that much building in the book, right? It's not as interesting. They trust that the house is being built. I used it to show how Jeremy felt a lot of the time, but you can place those feelings elsewhere, or you do a mention.
Yeah.
Like, trust your reader. They know. They understand. You give them a sentence about how things are going with the building, and they'll imagine it.
Yeah.
Right? They can imagine it. And so that, I think that I just tried to not worry in the first draft, right? You just don't worry. Just write. Get it out, and then you got something to work with, right? And so, and choose your trusted readers. That's really, really important. You have to get it read.
Right.
You can't write. Do you get people to read your book?
My wife reads mine.
That's not enough.
Yeah.
You need more people.
Okay.
You definitely need more people, because I find that there's somebody who's read one of the first books who had an encyclopedic mind, and was like, women weren't wearing gloves that long in that era.
All right.
That's so helpful. I never would have picked that up. The editor might not have picked that up, but somebody would write in.
I saw in your acknowledgements that you thank people for advice on concrete flooring.
Oh yes, exactly. Because again, you have to launch in really blithely. Like, I'll write this book, and then you're like, I don't know how people build houses, and I need a problem here. So I ended up, looking up somebody who specialized in pouring concrete floors, and called, and it turned out he was on his mobile in his van in Wales on his way to pour some concrete, and he, bless him, he was like, okay, I'll talk about this with you.
I always find that fascinating, because when you read the books, the author seems like the authority on everything. I saw an interview with Lee Child, who's Jack Reacher, and he doesn't know anything about guns. He's got a super fan who is
who knows everything,
guns, and he'll just send a draft to a super fan, and he'll be like, that's not how that goes.
That's not how that works. Yeah,
you
exactly.
want this gun instead, and then you read it, and it seems like Lee Child knows everything about guns.
So good. That is so good, because the superfan feels great.
Yeah.
And you don't have to pay him. Yeah. And you don't have to travel. You know, you have to stay in a hotel and visit the police or whatever it is. Yeah, that's so good. So choosing your readers fortunately, you know, I know people with teenage kids, or I have a niece who's the right age for the new book. But also, I think that a lot of adults read all genres, even things like Harry Potter. Older people read the book. The older people love the films. So having varied readers is really, really good. And just being able to take what they say, recognizing that nobody is your 100% guide. Everybody's a partial guide. That's really important, and it's your decision in the end.
I saw that you had a mentor as well.
Yes.
For the Jericho writers.
Yes.
Would you recommend?
Yes,
that sort of
I highly recommend that sort of scheme. Jericho writers, for a fee, they will put you together with an editor for a manuscript review. So they'll look at what your manuscript is about, and then pair you with somebody they think understands what you're doing, and you pay basically by I think it's a word count, and then you get a serious review of your book with them, what they thought, and they're very good, because they're like, here's what's great. And then here's where I think we need to talk about this, etc. And I did it also with children's books as well. So a children's book author read some little manuscripts that I have that I haven't done anything with, but it's encouraging. And they'll even, the children's book author also said, I'd suggest you submit it here or here, which was really, really helpful. I do recommend that, because they've seen a lot of books, they've edited a lot of books. So pace, they understand pace. Is it believable? Do they believe it? That's really, really helpful.
Yeah,
because,
especially I imagine with the sort of literary fiction you're
writing. Exactly. Nobody would ever do that.
They don't feel human in a Star Wars novel. It doesn't really matter.
Okay,
You know,
that's right.
Reading it for.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely recommend that. Writing in a vacuum isn't very productive, and you don't actually learn.
Yeah.
You don't actually learn. I had a mentor also at the very early days when I was writing short stories, who, one of the most important things she said to me was, whenever you get to something that looks like it's going to be quite emotional, you make a joke.
Oh, okay.
And that was very powerful for me, because that's when I was like, oh, you keep going, and what I had not been doing in my emotional life. And after a while, she actually wrote to me and said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, sure, I'm fine. She's like, well, look what you're writing. And I left my husband. It was really, really, really amazing.
Yeah.
How writing can be obvious to others what's going on with you, and you're like, I'm just writing a story.
Yeah.
You know. So it's very cathartic, and you don't know what you're doing. So if you start putting more interpersonal depth in your fantasy,
Yeah.
you will know more about yourself.
Right.
Which
yeah.
is great. Is really, and you can take it out.
Yeah.
You don't have to leave it there. Nobody has to see it, but just let yourself do it for a while and see. Or it could be the dragon. Like, you know, you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I think about that moment in Shrek. I don't know if you've watched Shrek. Do you remember when we had kids were younger? And they were like, "Oh, it's a girl dragon." And I thought that was wonderful. And they're like, "Oh, she got different feelings, and we have to flirt with her." Like, what is a dragon feeling?
Yeah.
I would like that.
Definitely, yeah. And mine is all werewolves and
Yeah.
people shoot werewolves. And I've sort of tried to work in some family drama in there.
Yeah.
It's a young girl against the government kind of thing.
Oh, great.
But it's
Oh,
definitely
great.
needs a lot of work. I feel like I've skipped ahead too quickly, so I've done that thing where I've done about 5 revisions of it.
Yeah.
And then started to make it to agents.
Right. Fair
and
enough.
25. No thank yous. But I feel like maybe reading it back, what I've done is I've got too excited, and
Yeah.
there's so much when you're online and you're trying to make a career as a writer,
Yeah.
just trying to get your foot in the door.
Yeah.
There's a lot of there's so many resources out there. It's crazy.
Yes.
And the resources are very enthusiastic.
Yeah.
And like, if you want to submit to agents, you just
Yeah,
do this,
that's
this,
all
and
you
this,
do.
and then you get excited about it, and then before you know it, you're on to that step before
Yeah.
you've even really done the steps before. I feel like is where I'm at.
Right. Okay. So, but did you get feedback?
From my wife and my father-in-law.
But the agents.
Oh no.
Right. So that's what's really difficult, and that used to be different, I think. Now, back when I started writing, we didn't have an internet, and we wrote to people with paper,
Yeah.
you know, and so I would get rejections on a piece of paper, and sometimes they were personal, and sometimes they were just a little form, but they'd write in pen, you know,
Okay.
don't be afraid to submit to us again, just not this one,
Right.
or something like. So they'd seen a good sentence, right? But not that piece. So there was more encouragement then. And I was really lucky with these books. So these were published in England by John Murray Books, and that in a 2-book deal. And that was achieved for me by an agent in the United States. He found an American publisher and then a British publisher for these 2 books. And he gave me so much feedback from the beginning, even before he took me on, which is very, very unusual. This book, I wanted to try and get it published again by another publisher, and I tried, I think 24,
Right.
and 34, and didn't get an agent for that. One of them wrote and said, it was her assistant wrote and said, so and so wants me to know that this is one of the strongest submissions she's received this year.
Yeah.
And that's supposed to make me feel good, but I'm like, what am I gonna, what can I do with that? I can't do anything with that because I don't know why it's not strong enough. So you're back to 0.
Yeah.
At the same time, they may have gotten 130,000 submissions that month. You know, it's not that many, but it feels like that to them, and it's a lot to read.
Yeah.
They're not obliged to tell us anything. It's not their job to tell us anything. It's their job to find somebody to sell.
Yeah.
So something like Jericho is really good. You get really good feedback from people who know agents, who know editors, who are agents.
Yeah.
That's really, really helpful. It's not that expensive.
We've
Definitely.
We've got a writing group. We've started up here.
Oh, really?
But obviously, it's only an hour once a month.
Yeah.
So we do a maximum of 2,000 words. So
Yeah.
We can't really get into that much depth. But
Of
I find
course.
that useful already.
I
Because
bet.
things like I've submitted my first chapter of my book, and
Yeah.
it's written in first person.
Yeah.
And they didn't realise the main character was a girl.
Oh, of
Things
course,
like
because you
that
don't
I
say
take
it.
for granted. And,
That they understood. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, little things like that. Really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So I want to know from you when you're going to start.
You mean actual writing
Yeah.
or the content of the book? Because the content of the book is in my head anyway. and
Right,
that's
so
what-
actual
that's-
writing. So actual writing.
Actual writing. Well, I was hoping by the end of this year,
Yeah.
because I'm trying to finish some projects that I have to do because I'm a
Yeah.
mathematician and computer scientist. So I
Yeah.
have to get rid of that stuff and put that out of the way so I
Okay.
can officially retire.
Oh, okay.
And,
Perfect.
And I was going to start at the end of this year.
Okay.
So
that's good because mind setting is really important. So
Yes.
you earlier you said it must take a lot of discipline.
Yes, I asked you that question.
Yes.
And it's also very interesting what you said on a couple of things there. Yes, with the discipline, you've answered some of it by saying.
I didn't say anything about discipline.
No, you didn't say about
Yeah.
well, you answered the question about the quantity you have to do. So in other words, you have to perfect certain things over time, which.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
So discipline and like mental rigor, like
Yes,
being
rigor.
rigorous with it.
Yes, rigor, and then the discipline that's required to achieve that rigor was the implication of how disciplined.
Oh, that's a
you need
good
to
question. I think so. I actually don't feel it as discipline so much because if it's not working, I want it to work.
Be. Yes.
Right. But I don't think there's anything I like doing more than working on this. So I don't go to it going like, I've got to write. I've got to go do this. I never feel that. I feel that about going back to other things.
I think there was another thing as well that you mentioned, which I found fascinating, which was that you didn't know what the end was when you started.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting thing to me about a book and the way that I would approach it, which is that I don't see a book as the story. I see a book as a window to the story. So you effectively are allowing someone through into that world.
Yeah.
And then they can make what they wish of it. And I think that the way that you're describing how you write kind of works that way.
Yeah.
So I was fascinated by that, and really that effectively you've got a story and you can put whatever schematic you like on it, and you can say, I'm going to start over there.
Yes.
I could start over there.
That's right. And often you start there and then switch it around, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I think is the reason why you could step away, look at another story and say, oh, hang on a second, I could use that framework on this one and move it around. So I could see the logic behind that.
Yeah.
And I found that fascinating.
It's interesting about the person that you're writing in third person, first person. Some people write in second person. You have this choice throughout. This whole book was in third person initially. And there was something about the Sue character that I felt she wasn't multifaceted enough, and I was struggling and I didn't know quite how to do it. And then I was listening to Bleak House.
I was going to say about Bleak House chapter 8, which is when I discovered that the first person was a girl.
Yes, right.
That's just me.
Yeah.
I guess I recently listened to it, and they say, is her name
Esther?
Esther's narrative. They say that before they go into that bit, so that only she's in first person. And I thought, what if Sue was in the first person? Then you would be in her.
I really enjoyed that about
Did
the
you?
book because I felt like you were sort of separate from Jeremy using third person in a way that made you a little bit more critical of him.
Yeah, exactly.
Pay attention to his actions a little bit more.
Okay. And you get intimate with Sue, not knowing what you know about Jeremy.
Yeah.
You're watching Jeremy do this thing, but you're in Sue, not seeing it.
Yeah.
So I hope that was horrible.
Yeah, it was dreadful. Yeah, that was one of the really
Good. Oh, good. Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is to have a play, right? To play and recognize. I think people get so stressed about what they're writing down when nobody's even looking.
Yeah.
Nobody's looking. You can write anything and do it however many ways you want.
Yes.
That's the thing. If you've got time.
Well, I think it's quite interesting. I mean, the idea for me, I was experimenting or thinking about the idea of having more than one view, so within the same book. So in other words, part first person, part third person, part whatever. Although I mean, that is done in another style, which is playwrights, really,
Yeah.
I suppose. Playwrights do exactly that. Everything is in the first person, but you still have a third person from a narrator occasionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, you know, experimenting with that in a novel could be very interesting.
And also it could be first person from 5 different perspectives as well. People
Yes.
do that. It's all wide, it's wide open to you. And just don't worry. Don't worry.
Yes,
just
I think,
do.
yes, I think that is right. I mean, there's a, no, I could talk to you for hours. I mean, it's
tricky, isn't it?
It's tricky.
But-
So there's
But what you were
obviously-
saying about like getting excited and sending stuff off to agents,
Mm.
everybody's done that.
Right.
We all do that.
Yeah.
And why not? And,
Yes,
and you say
yeah.
it. But the system is very difficult. The system is very difficult. So these 2 were published by John Murray. And then when, after I published Absolutely Delicious, it's not up there. Absolutely Delicious, A Chronicle of Extraordinary Dying, we set up our own little imprint bench press for that. It was locked down. Everything had come to a halt. I had such a vision for this book. I collaborated with an illustrator. We knew exactly what it would look like and thought, I'm not gonna spend it, yeah. It's very beautiful. You can see. So I was processing my mother's death in words, and her friend Marianne was processing it by drawing her. Yeah, she has beautiful sketch notebooks that she sketches in every day. And so we collaborated on how we processed this. And so we published it ourselves. And then coronavirus continued. Andy said, Glide's really good. We can publish that too. So we collaborated on Glide. And that gives you the agency to move things along. I think having experienced the death of my parents, actually my aunt died. My aunt who inspired this book died 3 months after my mom. And, this book, Lillian on Life. It's hard to read the title, Lillian on Life. You come home from that and you think, how much time have I got? Am I going to wait for agents to take 6 months to read my books anymore? Doesn't mean I'm just going to publish them. It means I'm going to go through the rigor that it requires to make them the book that I'm proud of and is a good reader experience, etc. Fortunately, my husband is a beautiful designer, so he's a photographer as well. He designed
The cover of that.
cover. Yeah, thank you. Beautiful cover. He did Glide as well, and Glide includes atmospheric photographs throughout because the main character is a photographer. So those are Andy's photos. That was our little COVID lockdown creative hub.
Yeah.
It's hard to sell them,
Yeah.
but you've done it and you've done it proud. You know.
I
So
saw that on your website, and I saw that
Yes.
you had a shop and you were publishing things yourself, and
Yeah.
you published your own books.
Yeah.
Your father's book.
That's
on
right.
there.
That's right.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It's really lovely.
it's very, very satisfying in the publishing.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating in the publicity.
Yeah.
Because we're in it's a churning sea of writers, and if you're a novelist, it's very hard. This is more of a niche. People who are interested in end-of-life issues. I'm involved in festivals with this. I'll be on a panel at the Birmingham Literature Festival with 2 other writers. It's on loss and memoir. You know, it's very specific, so that's a much easier sell. Novels,
Yeah.
domestic dramas, much harder.
You're competing with publishing companies that have
Oh,
billboard money.
that's exactly right. And also algorithm pushing stuff,
Yeah.
right? That's very difficult.
I saw that you've been reading Rich Osment, so you're also competing
Yes.
with celebrity authors
Exactly.
who are on TV every night.
Exactly. And even then it's hard. I talked to an author recently who wrote a memoir. She'll be on the panel as well. And she's often on television. She's been a journalist. She's a journalist, et cetera, and she promoted her paperback herself. The publisher did a good job with the hardback. She published the paperback, and she got a spread in The Guardian, and she was on Women's World and all of this, and it did nothing.
No, really.
Did not. And she said to me, if I can't get a book moving, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah.
Do you know? So that's really depressing.
Yeah.
So why do we write? Why do we write? Because we want to write. We need to write. That's the thing. I've had a lot of therapy, and my therapy said to me once, okay, let's imagine 50 publishers reject you in the next 2 years. What are you going to do? You're going to keep writing? Yes. There's your answer. Like, I have to. I love it so much. I feel it's otherworldly how I feel. I think that's the thing, that you feel like you're connected to something so much bigger, which is actually the size of your brain, and it feels huge. It's huge. So that I don't want an end to that. So there we are. You just have to relax. You have to relax.
Would you recommend that as a way for writers to spend their time working on the book rather than waiting to hear back about the book?
Yep.
Just
Yeah.
do it yourself.
Yeah, or start something else.
The tools are good. I've used Kindle's self-publishing platform.
KDP. Yeah, the tools are excellent.
Yeah.
The tools are excellent. The algorithms don't benefit you anymore.
Right.
They did they were very good at getting people to think it was a great way to publish and get known, etc. at the beginning, and then it's become, of course, harder and more people are doing it, etc., etc. So it's hard to be the one that gets noticed.
Yeah.
But you can be.
Yeah.
You can be noticed, and you can sell your book, and you can make it 99 cents, for a period, so that more people. I always buy books when my friends' books are 99 cents.
Yeah.
And I hope they'll buy mine at the same time, because, and that's the thing too. If your heart is easily broken, don't show anybody.
Yeah.
Don't show anybody, because even your closest friends won't read your book sometimes. That was a rude awakening.
Yeah.
But then it can't stop you.
Yeah.
That's so find your people. Find your people, and lots of people love dragons,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But what's your spin on it?
Yeah. I think I need to get it out there a bit more and
Yeah.
get people reading it and
Yes.
get them with their red pens.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
it.
And then take it or leave it, but at least it's stimulating. It's very
Definitely.
stimulating.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we don't know. Every single thing we write makes sense to us,
Yeah. Yeah.
and possibly only us. So you have to test it.
Yeah,
And your
that's
wife knows
always-
you that well.
Yeah, that's always my issue.
Right?
Is either I get too big headed and I assume
Yeah.
that everybody's going to figure out what
you meant?
what I'm meaning from
And they might.
part. Or I go the other way and I'm like, oh, they're never going to realize this.
So you spoon feed them.
40 years of fictional history that I've given this novel,
Right.
so I should probably just put everything in, and then it's boring. And
Yeah.
Then it's like,
Oh, I hate being spoon fed.
yeah.
I hate
yeah.
it. So finding that balance, right?
It's
You
very
have to
tricky.
give it to people ideally who don't know you,
Yeah.
or who know you and are super honest, right? But you don't have to do what they say.
Yes.
That's the thing. You have to think about it.
Yeah. I read you've got an interesting approach to writer's block.
Oh, yeah.
using Improvisation.
Improvisation, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Could you talk a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Do you know whose line is it anyway? Do you know
Yeah.
comedy improv,
Great
that kind of
show,
stuff?
yeah.
Where comedians or actors are on stage, but the audience gives them the content of what they should do. And then you have to make it up on the spot. I did that a long time, and that was very, very helpful in freeing up my inner critic, because you don't have time to think, should I say this, should I say that? You have to trust your response and practice not what you're going to say, but how you're going to behave, which has a lot to do with openness to your ideas. So I don't necessarily use improv in the moment. I just know that I'll come up with something.
Right.
I just have learned that there's never nothing. Silence isn't the absence of thought. You just can't hear it yet. And I think writers get blocked where they have silence, and that frightens them. That stops you because you're frightened.
Right.
So I don't get frightened.
Yeah.
It's
just
okay.
plow on.
Yeah, just plow on or just sit.
Yeah.
Or ride a bike. Often riding a bike, I'll think, oh, that's it. And turn around and do it again.
Yeah.
Go back and write it down. Yeah, that's really important.
I found it useful to bully myself with word counts, like daily word
Oh,
counts.
keep going.
You have to
Okay.
get 500 words a day, so you just have to type whether it's rubbish or not.
Yeah.
It often is, but
Yes.
you get to the end and then you can redo it.
Yes, exactly. So this, if you're beginning a novel, this is, and you're criticizing yourself too early, the metaphor that works the best for me is often when you haven't used the tap in a long time, you open it and the water isn't clear, is it? You've got brown water coming in. You don't turn it off. It doesn't resolve itself if you turn it off. You leave it open.
Right.
and wait. You keep writing until it starts running clear.
Yeah.
Leave it open.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
I think we might have to wrap up shortly.
Okay.
We're
Just got here.
I'm so sorry. We have a Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, excellent.
Here in a few minutes.
Oh, excellent.
But thank you very much for coming.
Oh, thank you
Really
so much for the
appreciate
invitation, and thank you all. Really, really interesting to talk to you. Yes, one more question.
Would you help others to publish through your...
Yeah, I mentor writers. Yeah,
You do?
I definitely do. For money.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, because it takes a long time. It
Yeah.
takes time away from. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's really important, and people have done the same for me. But it's been key for me, so I think it's very important. And yeah, if you don't know other writers, it's hard. So it's really important. Yeah,
It
definitely.
seems to be quite niche in the way you approach writing.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about, we have a member of our family who's on the autistic spectrum
Yeah.
who writes beautifully.
Oh.
Absolutely writes beautifully,
Wow.
and it's very, to me, reading the way words are put together in a very
Yes.
efficient way.
Wow.
It's kind of prose, but it's also poetry as well.
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's quite a niche form. I
Do they
think.
need help
Probably
Yeah.
to know. So
to know what to do next?
to know what to do next.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
knowing what to do next.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We can
Thank
talk
you.
about that.
Thank
yeah,
you.
talk about that. Yeah, absolutely. Oh,
What would be your desert island book? You know Desert Island?
yes, of course.
Obviously not Shakespeare. You can't have Shakespeare in the Bible.
Okay.
Or you haven't thought of this before then? No, obviously not.
Well, you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to choose,
If you
should
were
you?
stuck forever and ever with
No.
just the one book, it would be awful.
No. However, let me tell you the name of a book that I could read. I will read again. I've read twice, and I would read again and again because for me, it's. I don't want to say it's the best book I've ever read because I have many of those, but I think it's a perfect book. It's not a long book, so that would be difficult on a desert island. But the perfect book for me is a book called Out Stealing Horses by a Norwegian writer called Per Pedersen, and it is what he does with what he hasn't said is unbelievable to me. So you could spend a lot of time on a desert island reading that and going, what is that story? Like, you should read it for, like, if you don't want to do like 8 million years of backstory.
Right,
What did he do
yeah.
with one line?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
it's beautiful. And it's, if you're interested in, if you like World War II stuff, it's very interesting in Norway and Spy, and it's so beautiful.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Mine is World War II, sort of adjacent.
Yes.
So I want pinch from that.
World War II adjacent.
It's
That's
sort
it.
of World War II.
Your
but
book
then,
is?
Yeah.
Oh.
World War II, and then it goes off on an alternate history. Kind of
Okay.
thing.
You'd read that again and again.
Oh no, sorry.
You mean the one you're
that's-
writing?
That's what I'm trying to write.
Oh, the dragons in World War II dragons.
Werewolves.
Oh, werewolves. Sorry.
So
Excellent.
yeah, the idea of being able to just say a lot with
Exactly.
fewer words.
Understatement.
Yeah.
I mean, he's Norwegian. I think that they admit
They
to
built
that
that.
being that, yeah,
Yeah. definitely.
stuff happens, but let's talk about it minimally. Amazing. Okay,
Brilliant. Well,
done.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There's tea, there's biscuits, there's books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. No, that was brilliant.